She's one technical foul away from a suspension. And she knows it. These days, every time Caitlin Clark opens her mouth on a basketball court, there's a number hanging over her. 7. 7 technical fouls, with weeks of basketball still to play, and one more doesn't just cost her money, it costs her a game. In a season where the Indiana Fever are scrapping for playoff position on every single possession. This isn't a story about one bad call, or one hot night, or a player who can't control her temper. It's a season-long walk on a tightrope, a superstar who wears her frustration more openly than almost anyone else in the league, an officiating crew under more scrutiny than at any point in WNBA history, and a franchise trying to win games while its best player edges closer to the line the league draws for everybody. By the time this is over, you'll know exactly how Clark got here. Why a collision with a referee in Chicago nearly cost her a game. Why she and Angel Reese keep landing together at the top of the same unflattering leaderboard. And why what happens over Indiana's final stretch might matter more than anything that showed up in a box score all summer. Let's start where the tightrope actually began. Not this season, the one before it. Go back to the spring, before this season tipped off. Caitlin Clark sat across from Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi on a broadcast and made herself a promise, out loud, in front of an audience. She was going to cut her technical fouls down. Way down. Low single digits. It's the kind of promise that sounds reasonable in March and turns nearly impossible the moment the games start counting for real. Clark had finished her rookie year with 6 technicals, one short of the number that triggers an automatic suspension. Taurasi, who'd led the league in technical fouls 9 separate times over her career, wasn't buying the pledge. She set the over-under on Clark's total for the coming year at 4.5. Then took the over herself, without much hesitation. Taurasi knew something it takes most rookies a year or two to learn. Technical fouls aren't really about temper. They're about how a player talks to officials when a call goes against them. How visibly they react to contact that never gets whistled. How much slack a crew is willing to extend a star before they stop extending it. And Clark, from the very beginning of her career, has never been quiet about any of that. Her first technical as a pro came in a preseason game, before anything even counted, when frustration over a non-call had her firing the ball into a basket stanchion. It didn't touch her total, but it was a preview of what was coming. Go back further, to her final college tournament, and the pattern's already there. A technical in the biggest game of her season, drawn by an official who'd simply had enough of the back and forth. None of this is new behavior for Clark. What's changed is the stage, the stakes, and the number of people counting. Here's the rule, laid out plainly, because everything that follows hangs on it. In today's WNBA, a player or coach is automatically suspended without pay for one game the moment they pick up an 8th technical foul in the regular season. The fine attached to that 8th technical climbed to $1,500, up from the $1,000 fine for technicals 4 through 7. And the counter doesn't stop there. Every 2 technicals past the 8th trigger another automatic 1-game suspension. The 10th, the 12th, and so on. The threshold used to sit at 7. The league bumped it to 8 when it expanded the regular season to 44 games. An implicit admission that more games would mean more whistles. That single number 8 is the whole shape of this story. It's the ceiling Clark spent the season climbing toward, technical by technical, argument by argument, until by the middle of August she'd reached 7 with a dozen games still left on the schedule, staring straight up at it. Walk through how she got there. Because the list itself tells you something about the season. Technical number 1 came against the Los Angeles Sparks, an offensive foul call with 20 seconds left in the first half. Clark didn't let it go. She went right at official Jason Alabanza as the clock wound down toward the break, and Alabanza answered the way officials are trained to answer a player who won't stop arguing. A technical, right as the half ended. 9 days later, technical number 2. Against the Golden State Valkyries. Again before halftime. Again an argument that didn't cool off fast enough. Technical number 7, the one that put her one whistle from a suspension, had nothing to do with contact at all. During a game, Clark told opposing guard Saniya Rivers to check the scoreboard. Both players picked up technicals on the same play. And that's what makes this season's total so combustible. It wasn't a shove. Wasn't a flagrant. Just two competitors getting under each other's skin with words, and a whistle that treated those words the same way it treats a shove. That's 7. And then came Chicago. Picture it. Late third quarter, fever up on the Chicago sky, Clark driving to the rim. She gets bumped on the way in. No call. Frustrated, she flips the ball out to Myisha Hines-Allen as she's sprinting toward the baseline. Momentum carrying her past the sideline and straight into one of the officials. There was contact. But there was no malice in it. Just a collision, born of speed and frustration, and a body that couldn't stop in time. Within seconds, the official's arm went up. Technical foul. Number 8. For a few minutes, that number just sat there, like a verdict already handed down. Clark had picked up the technical that, under the league's own rule, meant an automatic suspension. And not for some throwaway late-season game. The Fever's next matchup was against the New York Liberty. Marquee opponent. National broadcast. Exactly the kind of night no superstar wants to spend in a suit, in the tunnel. Clark, for her part, sounded almost resigned to it, walking off after the win. Talking to a sideline reporter, she said she figured she'd see everyone again on Tuesday. No real anger in it, just an acknowledgement that she expected the suspension to hold. It took the league 2 hours to reverse itself. After review, the WNBA rescinded the technical, ruling the contact with the official incidental, not deliberate, not protest. Just like that, the 8th technical came off the books. The suspension evaporated. Clark's total reset to 7. Dangerous. But survivable. Here's the part that's easy to miss if all you remember is the headline. This wasn't the first time this exact scenario had played out around the league this season, and it wasn't treated as some total outlier, either. Earlier in the year, a different guard picked up a technical for clapping during an argument with an opponent, and that one got rescinded too, on the reasoning that a gesture alone, without real evidence of intent to instigate, didn't clear the bar for a technical. Across this whole season, the league has shown itself willing to walk back a call when the review suggests the whistle moved faster than the situation actually called for. That's a double-edged fact. It's reassuring if you're a player worried about a phantom suspension. It's also a sign that this season's technicals, taken as a whole, have been unusually inconsistent. Inconsistent enough that the league keeps having to grade its own officials' homework after the final horn. It would be easy to tell this story like Caitlin Clark is some uniquely combustible figure, a lone flashpoint in an otherwise calm league. The numbers don't back that up. Tied with Clark at the top of this season's technical foul leaderboard is Angel Reese, a rival dating back to their college days. A player who's never been shy about chasing a foul call of her own. Both sit at 7 technicals as the season heads into its final stretch. Both one whistle from a suspension. Both walking the exact same tightrope, at the exact same time. Zoom out and the picture gets bigger still. Across roughly 240 games this season, officials had already called well over 150 technical fouls. A pace that, if it holds, blows past last season's league record by a wide margin. Some of that's simple math. More teams, more games, more roster spots means more chances for a whistle. But even accounting for expansion, this ranks among the most technical-heavy stretches in league history, trailing only a couple of specific seasons from over a decade back. 5 players who've debuted only in the last few seasons, Clark among them, alongside Reese, Shakira Austin, Nalissa Smith, and Sabrina Ionescu, already sit inside the top 50 in career technical fouls. That's a startling number for players this early in their careers. And it suggests something bigger than any one personality. It suggests a league where the physicality, the stakes, and the scrutiny have all risen together, and the whistle has become one of the main ways that tension gets written down for history. So when Clark's name comes up in a conversation about technical fouls, the honest answer isn't that she's an outlier. It's that she's the most visible face of a league-wide trend. The player most people happen to be watching when that trend shows up on their screen. Numbers on a stat sheet don't capture what a season like this actually feels like from inside a locker room. And this season produced its own version of that tension, not just between Clark and the officials, but inside the walls of the Fever's own building. Reporting through the summer pointed to real friction between Clark and head coach Stephanie White. The kind of disagreement that doesn't always make it into a post-game press conference but still shapes rotations, shapes body language on the bench, shapes how a team gets read from the outside. At the same time, front office decisions involving veteran guard Sophie Cunningham, the same Cunningham who'd spent much of the previous season serving as the physical buffer between Clark and the league's most aggressive defenders, added another layer of noise to a locker room already trying to close out a playoff race. None of that shows up in a box score. But it's the context sitting underneath every technical foul conversation this season. A team fighting for seeding. Playing without some of its injured pieces for stretches of the year. Carrying a superstar who's both must-watch television and a walking suspension risk. Coached by a staff facing its own outside pressure. That's not a simple story about one player's temper. That's an organization managing half a dozen storylines at once, under a magnifying glass that only gets bigger every time Clark's name trends. And through all of it, the Fever kept winning. Here's what tends to get buried under every technical foul headline. Statistically, this has been the best stretch of Caitlin Clark's career. Through most of the season, missing a handful of games to injury along the way, Clark was putting up somewhere around 22 points and 8+ assists a night. The assist number led the entire league outright. The scoring number ranked third among all players. Points and assists together, at that level, put her squarely in the MVP conversation, alongside a rookie sensation up in Minnesota and her own teammate, Kelsey Mitchell, who was quietly outscoring Clark on a per-game basis while putting together one of the most underrated seasons in the league. Then August turned quiet dominance into outright history. Against the Dallas Wings, Clark went for 29 points and 10 assists in a Fever win. The 13th time in her career she's closed a game with at least 25 points and 10 assists. No one else in league history has more than 6 of those, total, across a whole career. Clark had 13. 7 of them in this season alone. A few nights later, against Atlanta, she put up 26 and 9 as Indiana rallied from 9 down and won in overtime, stretching a winning streak to 4 straight. Against New York, the very game she nearly missed because of the Chicago technical, she kept adding to a scoring pace that had her blowing past some of the fastest players in league history, first to 1,400 career points, then 1,600. The names ahead of her on that fastest to 1,600 list are legitimate legends of the sport. Clark got there faster than nearly all of them. So hold both facts in your head at once, because neither one cancels the other out. Caitlin Clark spent long stretches of this season, one technical foul from a suspension. She also spent this season playing some of the most statistically dominant basketball anyone in this league has ever produced. The record book and the disciplinary ledger were being written in the same games, by the same player, and neither one slowed the other down. Strip away the technicals, the sideline confrontations, the headlines about locker room tension, and look at what Indiana actually did on the floor down the stretch. They got hot at exactly the right time. Wins over Chicago. Wins over Dallas. A dramatic overtime win over Atlanta that pushed a streak to 4 straight. By the middle of August, the Fever had climbed to 23 wins against 12 losses. Firmly in the thick of a playoff race that, earlier in the year, had looked far less certain given the roster's injury history. Kelsey Mitchell's fingerprints are all over that surge. A guard scoring at a higher clip than Clark for stretches of the year, sharing a backcourt with the most famous player in the sport and getting a fraction of the attention for it. Role players stepped up too. A second-year forward drew praise straight from Clark and the coaching staff for the kind of maturity that never shows up on a stat sheet but shows up in close games. A quiet double-double off the bench here, a strong defensive stretch from a starter there. The contributions that get erased from the conversation the moment a technical foul controversy takes over the news cycle, even though they decided more of these games than any argument with an official ever did. It's the same pattern that showed up back in June, in that infamous 6 technical, 2 ejection night against Phoenix. The game everyone remembers for the chaos was, underneath it, a game Indiana had already functionally won with a dominant third quarter, before the confrontations even started. The technical fouls changed the conversation. They rarely change the final score. So where does that leave things, with a dozen or so games left and Clark sitting on 7 technicals? The mechanics are simple, even if the pressure isn't. One more technical, almost any kind, an argument that runs too long, incidental contact with an official, a verbal exchange with an opponent that draws a joint whistle, and Clark misses a game automatically. No discretion. No appeal beyond the kind of after-the-fact review that saved her in Chicago. And every 2 technicals after that adds another mandatory absence. Unlike a suspension for conduct, this isn't something a team can plan around. It can land in the middle of a playoff push, on national television, against a direct standings rival, with zero warning beyond the whistle itself. There's one piece of relief built into the system. The technical foul count resets once the playoffs begin. Whatever number Clark's carrying on the final day of the regular season disappears the moment postseason basketball starts. So every technical between now and the end of the regular season carries real, tangible risk. But the moment Indiana clinches its spot and the calendar flips to October, the countdown starts over from zero. That single fact reframes everything left on the schedule. These aren't just games in a playoff race anymore. They're the last live rounds in a season-long game of chicken, between a superstar who's never quite learned to bite her tongue, and an officiating crew that's shown, over and over, it will call what it sees, regardless of whose jersey is involved. Worth pausing here to correct something people tend to get wrong about Clark and technical fouls, because the popular version of the story and the real version aren't quite the same. The popular version says Clark arrived in the league hot-headed and never changed. The real timeline is messier, and more interesting. Her rookie season, she picked up 6 technicals, one short of a suspension, but spread across a full, mostly healthy year of basketball. Her second season, the one where she made that on-air promise to Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, she barely played. Injuries limited her to 13 games, and with that little court time, there simply wasn't enough basketball for the technicals to stack up. On paper, she kept her promise. In reality, she never got the chance to test it. This season is the first real test of whether Clark can play a full, healthy slate without her frustration boiling over into a whistle. And the early answer is complicated. Stretch her 7 technicals across a full workload and she's on pace to land somewhere close to her rookie total. Maybe a touch higher. That's not the 2 technical dream season she talked about back in the spring. But it's not the runaway spiral some of the loudest online commentary made it out to be after Chicago, either. What's changed isn't really her temperament. It's the environment around her. Every technical she picks up now gets analyzed, clipped, and argued over by a fan base and media apparatus that didn't exist at anywhere near this scale 2 years ago. A technical that would have been a footnote in some random midweek game back in 2019 is a national headline within the hour today. The behavior's roughly consistent. The magnification isn't. There's a structural reason this particular tension, a superstar chafing against officiating, a league defending its whistle, keeps recurring. And it has less to do with any one player's personality than with how attention itself has reshaped the sport. Every Fever game this season has been appointment viewing. National broadcast slots, sold-out road arenas, more cameras on every whistle Clark draws than on almost any other individual foul call in the league. That kind of attention creates a feedback loop. Officials know any call involving Clark gets replayed and argued about online within minutes. Players know it too, which raises the emotional stakes of every non-call in a way a quieter, less-watched matchup simply doesn't carry. Then there's the physical reality of her game. She's a high-volume ball handler who draws contact by design, probing defenses off the dribble on nearly every possession. A player who initiates that much contact is going to accumulate more marginal, judgment call fouls, drawn and against her, than a spot-up shooter who touches the ball twice a trip. More contact means more moments where the whistle could go either way. And more moments where a player convinced she got robbed has to decide, in real time, how loudly to say so. None of this excuses any specific technical. But it explains why this exact storyline, a star chafing against the whistle, a league defending its officiating, a fan base split down the middle on every close call, was close to inevitable the moment Clark became the most watched player in the sport's history. The technicals aren't happening because officiating suddenly got worse, or because Clark suddenly got angrier. They're happening because more people than ever are watching closely enough to notice. One more zoom out before the close, because this story is bigger than one team's playoff push. A league setting technical foul records in the same season it's setting attendance records, broadcast rating records, and franchise valuation records. That's a league navigating growth in real time, and growth rarely arrives without friction. More scrutiny on officiating. More debate about consistency. More players, across more rosters, learning where the new lines sit under an expanded schedule and a raised suspension threshold. Clark-Reese sitting tied atop the technical foul leaderboard isn't 2 hot tempers colliding by accident. It's 2 of the most competitive, most watched players in league history, both refusing to disengage from a call they believe is wrong, both playing every night in front of an audience large enough to turn any one of those moments into a talking point. The rivalry between them predates either one's pro career. The technicals are just the latest place it shows up on a stat sheet. For the league office, that's a balancing act with real consequences either way. Crack down too hard, and you risk suspending your two biggest attractions for procedural reasons in nationally televised games. Ease off, and you risk a credibility problem. The perception that the whistle bends for stars in a way it doesn't for role players. The exact criticism that dogged the rescinded techs in Chicago and elsewhere this season. There's no version of the rest of this season where that tension fully resolves. It just keeps getting managed. Game by game. Review by review. Technical by technical. While the technical foul counter dominated the headlines, a genuine MVP race was quietly playing out underneath it. And Clark is only one part of that conversation, not the whole thing. A Minnesota rookie forced her way into the discussion by mid-season, putting up numbers good enough that national media started asking whether a first-year player could actually win the award outright. On the same night the Fever were living through their technical foul drama in Chicago, that rookie was busy putting up nearly 30 points, 6 assists, and 3 threes of her own in a Lynx win over Indiana. A reminder that Clark's storyline, loud as it is, isn't running unopposed. Then there's the case for Kelsey Mitchell, Clark's own backcourt partner, scoring at a higher clip than Clark for long stretches of the year, without anywhere near the same attention. Mitchell dropped 37 on that same Lynx team, combined with Clark for over 50 points in a win over Dallas, and generally played the kind of efficient, high-volume season that in a quieter year might have carried an MVP case of its own. National commentators, including former NFL quarterback-turned-media personality Robert Griffin III, still put Clark at the top of their MVP rankings, ahead of Mitchell, ahead of the Minnesota rookie, ahead of four-time winner Aya Wilson, still one of the most dominant two-way players in the league. The honest version of this race has at least 3 or 4 legitimate names in it. But Clark's name is the one that gets attached to the technical foul story. Clark's name trends every time she argues a call. Clark's name is the one most casual fans associate with this MVP conversation, regardless of how the actual voting shakes out. That imbalance, real team success and individual dominance from multiple players, filtered down to a single storyline about one player's temper, is its own small case study in how attention works in this league right now. The Clark-Reese pairing at the top of the technical foul leaderboard isn't just a statistical coincidence worth a footnote. It's the latest chapter in one of the defining rivalries of a generation of women's basketball, and it's worth understanding why it keeps producing moments like this. Their history predates either player's professional career by years. A series of high-profile college matchups that helped turn women's basketball into must-watch television long before either of them was drafted. That history followed both of them into the pros, and it shows up in small, visible ways almost every time their teams share a court. During a recent Fever win over Atlanta, cameras caught Clark's reaction to a missed layup by Reese in a crucial moment, a beat that circulated widely online within hours, not because it was some dramatic piece of basketball, but because any visible moment between these two gets treated as a headline no matter how small it actually is. That's the environment both of them compete inside. Every whistle, every made shot, every reaction shot gets run through the lens of a rivalry that started years before either player turned pro. It raises the emotional temperature of ordinary basketball plays into something closer to theater, and it means neither player gets the benefit of a quiet, low-scrutiny night, even in a random midweek game against an unrelated opponent. When people ask why Clark and Reese keep showing up together atop technical foul leaderboards, part of the answer really is simple competitiveness. But part of it is also a decade of accumulated attention that's taught both of them that backing down from a moment, verbally or otherwise, comes with its own cost to how they're perceived. And neither one has shown much interest in paying that price. Buried inside the schedule itself is another layer to this story that rarely gets discussed alongside the technical foul drama. Just how difficult the stretch was that Indiana was navigating while all of this played out. The Fever opened a 5-game road trip in the middle of this run, starting with a hard-fought overtime win in Atlanta. The kind of game that tests depth, composure, and exactly the sort of in-game discipline technical fouls threaten to undermine. Winning on the road, against a team fighting for its own playoff life, without a home crowd or a favorable whistle, is a different kind of pressure than anything that shows up in a highlight reel. Every technical risk during a stretch like that carries extra weight, because a suspension on the road doesn't just cost a game. It costs the Fever a shot at building the exact kind of road resume that separates a dangerous playoff seed from a vulnerable one. Elsewhere around the league, that same late-season pressure was reshaping other contenders' fortunes in ways that indirectly affected how much scrutiny Indiana's own drama received. A Vegas team built to contend for a title found itself fielding public questions about whether an unfavorable playoff schedule could cost it a real shot at the crown, regardless of the roster's talent. A Dallas team snapped a losing streak behind a standout rookie point guard right as Indiana was trying to pull away from the pack. Every one of those storylines was competing for the same limited attention Clark's technical foul saga was consuming, and the fact that her story kept winning that competition, night after night, says as much about her singular pull on the sports audience as anything that happened on the actual court. No account of the season is complete without the machine that turns every one of these moments into content within minutes of it happening, because that machine is, in its own way, a character in this story. The scoreboard-comment technical against Saniya Rivers existed as a piece of internet culture before most fans had even seen a full replay of the play, spreading through short-form clips and reaction posts faster than any official recap could keep up with. The Chicago collision followed the same pattern. Within the 2-hour window between the technical being called and the league rescinding it, it had already been dissected, argued over, and turned into speculation about whether Clark would really miss the Liberty game, all before the league itself had finished its own review. That speed changes the incentives for everyone involved. Officials know a marginal call involving Clark gets clipped and replayed from a dozen angles before the next television timeout ends. Opposing players know that any physical or verbal exchange with her carries a built-in audience bigger than almost anything else happening on a court that night. And Clark herself, whether she means to or not, has become a kind of walking referendum on officiating standards. Every technical she picks up gets instantly recruited as evidence in a much larger, much older argument about whether officiating in this league is too inconsistent, too lenient, or too eager to protect its biggest stars, depending on which side of that debate a given fan already occupied before the whistle blew. None of that machinery makes any single call more or less correct. But it explains why a technical foul this season carries more narrative weight than the same call would have carried 5 years ago, on a less watched player, in a less online sport. Strip away everything else, the technicals, the rivalry, the internet noise, and there's a genuinely open question sitting underneath this whole season. One that won't have a real answer for years. Does a season like this help or hurt how Caitlin Clark gets remembered? The record book will show a player who reached 1,600 career points faster than nearly every legend who came before her, who led the league in assists, who kept a franchise in playoff contention through injuries and internal tension alike. It'll also show a player who spent long stretches of a signature season one technical foul away from a suspension, who drew more scrutiny for her relationship with officials than almost any player in league history not named Diana Taurasi. History tends to be kind to dominant statistical seasons, and comparatively forgetful about the disciplinary footnotes that surrounded them in real time. Taurasi's 9 technical foul titles are a trivia answer now, not a defining feature of how she's remembered. If that pattern holds, this season's technical foul saga fades into a footnote too, remembered mainly by the people who lived through it in real time, while the box scores and milestone chases become the actual legacy. But if the pattern breaks, if one more technical this season turns into an actual suspension during a pivotal playoff push, the footnote becomes the headline instead. And an otherwise historic year gets remembered first for the game Clark had to watch from the bench. That's the real stakes of every remaining game on this schedule. Not just wins and losses. Not just seeding. Which version of this season gets written into the record books as the one people actually remember? 2 things have been true about Caitlin Clark all season long, and neither one is going anywhere before the final horn. She is one of the most statistically dominant players the WNBA has ever seen. A guard rewriting speed records for career scoring and assist milestones. A walking argument for MVP. A player whose box score this season belongs in the same conversation as the greatest single seasons in league history. She is also, by her own admission, someone who's never fully learned to let a bad whistle go. And in a season where officiating itself has become one of the league's biggest storylines, that habit has put her one bad night away from missing a game she can't afford to miss. Neither fact makes the other one less true. The record book doesn't ask how many technicals it took to get there. But the standings, this time of year, care about every single game. And for the rest of this season, Caitlin Clark is one whistle away from handing one of them away for free. If this broke it down for you, like, comment, and subscribe.